Proszę Państwa, rok temu naszym gościem specjalnym był prezes Red Hata, pan Werner Knoblich. Werner tak się zachwycił naszą konferencją, że bardzo pragnął przyjechać do nas znowu. Niestety okazało się, że data naszej konferencji kolidowała już z zaplanowaną wcześniej konferencją, która była w Paryżu. No i pojawił się dylemat Warszawa, Paryż. Warszawa, Paryż, co wybrać? Werner podjął bardzo szybko decyzję, poprosił swoich współpracowników, zróbcie wszystko, aby mógł przyjechać do Warszawy. Proszę Państwa, człowiek, który wybrał Polskę. Prezes Red Hata, który chciał być dzisiaj tutaj z nami.
So a very warm welcome to our first speaker, the Managing Director for Europe, Middle East and Africa, as well as the Vice President of Red Hat. For the third or fourth time in Poland, Werner, the stage is yours. Warm welcome to Werner Knoblich.
Good morning, everybody. Easy words own the new now, but not necessarily easy to understand. The meaning actually is to master or be in control of the new paradigm, which is right now happening in enterprise IT. As we all know, there's now a big shift in enterprise IT to a complete new paradigm, as we have not seen it probably within the last, at least decade, maybe even 2 decades. Since the major shift to client servers, I think nothing happened again of this order of magnitude. So that's why we came up with this slogan, "Own the new now." Now it's like I have to explain it because it's not about possessing something; it's about being in control or mastering the new paradigm shift. So if I now get my remote control. So we lost the remote control, but it's okay, so I have to operate with the keyboard. Do you have it? Okay. Somebody in the audience have it? Okay, we keep looking for it. So what's actually the opportunity? We potentially miss out, or it's in front of us, owning the new now, owning this new shift. On one side, a huge opportunity in reducing costs from an application development, develop more applications, have more applications, decrease management costs, productivity savings. So there's huge opportunity. Thank you very much. Huge opportunity out there. This data comes from IDC research, done with customers using, open source technologies. And these are just examples, so the opportunity is really big. Giving you a customer example of what we call like a new now customer, very prominent customer, it's actually Salesforce.com. Who does not know Salesforce.com? Nobody, so I assume if I ask the question the other way around, everybody will raise their hand, but I will save you this. Salesforce is one of the fastest growing companies actually in the world in the IT industry, with close to 100,000 customers. And they had a true, real challenge. They have close to 2 million subscribers. If you're a user of Salesforce, everything is happening more or less, as a service. So they need a big back-end, infrastructure to, serve their customers with reliable service and performance. And they rely there on complete open source architectures to pretty much, run their data center in the back end. With fantastic results. Unfortunately, not everybody is there at this point, but more and more companies are getting there. So if we take a look, what's actually the situation most customers are in? it's actually this problem. There's a huge demand, and the demand keeps increasing, but nobody has enough resources in terms of money or in terms of human resources to actually fulfill this demand. And this gap keeps increasing every single day. So the problem is becoming bigger, it's not getting smaller. And we are convinced that by keep doing it the old-fashioned way, by trying to optimize in the one area and a little bit in a different area and fine-tune there another 5%, will not solve this big problem. It will not solve the big problem because the gap between the increasing demand and the limited resources will keep increasing if not a bigger shift is happening and people start to really do things differently. And we are convinced that there are like 3 things which need to happen or can help bridging this gap between the limiting resources and the increased demand. And the first thing is more extensive use of open source software. So let me talk a little bit about this, what we mean with this. So it's about talking about the power of open source. Open source is not a business model. Open source is just a different way to develop software. It's not more, and it's not less. It's a different way of developing software with a different economic model behind it. When you look at Red Hat, and what we are doing, take Linux as the prime example, but it also applies to JBoss and other offerings, where there's a huge community out there where you have hundreds of thousands of different projects and you have thousands of developers pretty much developing, code. And it's not just, people from universities and, freelancers, it's major companies as well, like, major, hardware manufacturers or software manufacturers, be it IBM, be it Intel, be it Google, be it HP, be it SAP, big contributor to this community. So everybody works on it, but at the end, not everybody is paying everybody who's developing it. So there's a phenomenal economic model behind it. And there was a research done by the Linux Foundation. They estimated if Fedora, our community distribution from a Linux perspective, would have been developed in a proprietary way, it would equal roughly $10 to $11 billion of development cost. We within Red Hat, we have a little bit over 1,000 developers, or 1,300 developers. Believe me, these 1,200 developers don't cost 10 billion. We don't pay this high salaries, believe me. So there is a lot of power in this development process, in this community-driven development process, because the economic model is just phenomenal. And at the end, who benefits is the customer by much better price value offering of the products. And on top of this, it's actually better software. It's software which actually gets innovated in a faster way. It is complete enterprise ready because it's also developed, by enterprise companies acting in the community. So the power behind the open source software development model is one way to bridge this gap between this increasing demand and the limiting resources. So bottom line, actually, open source helps Red Hat make better software faster at a lower cost. And this does not apply just to Red Hat, it applies to all other companies who are, developing software in the same way. So what's next? Open source, use of open source is one way to bridge this gap. Next one is a business model. When I say business model, it means there needs to be a change in having a more customer-friendly, value-based business model and not the classical business model of the proprietary software companies, which just selling licenses, often selling to customers and charging customer license prices where the customer does not even know what they are paying for. They're forced to upgrade. Again, don't know what's really the value, but they have to upgrade. So there needs to be a change in adopting a different business model. I think we as Red Hat, we have driven there, a subscription-based business model and especially a value-based business model. Key thing is for us that with this business model, a customer starts to get in control, which is the most important thing. Because when you look on what we are doing and how we are making money, when I always get asked by friends, what do you do? I always say, I sell free software. Sounds very hard, selling free software. But making money with selling free software, believe me, is not easy. It's actually quite hard. Because you have to truly add value and prove to the customer on an ongoing basis that the customer is willing to pay something. Because what we are selling is not functionality. Functionality in the open source world is for free. If you want functionality in bits and bytes, go to the internet, download the bits and bytes, and use the software. Functionality is for free. Every open source company which tries actually to sell functionality usually fail, because the functionality is free and it's very hard to compete with the free functionality if you want to charge for it. So what we truly have to do is add value to the free functionality, okay? And constantly add this value and prove to the customer that there's an added value, because otherwise they will not renew the subscription. So our whole business model is based on successful renewals, and the customer is just renewing if there is true added value, because there is no lock-in, like in a proprietary world. Because there's no lock-in, because the technology is based on an open source license, so the customer, if they don't want to keep, subscribing with us, can stop the subscription, but can still keep using, the bits and the bytes without paying money to us. Okay, so we have to constantly add value so that we can make money. So the business model in itself is, helps a lot, adding value to customers, and at the end also closing this gap between the limited resources and the increased demand, because we truly have to add value. This is how we have done so far. So before I go to the third bullet, let's see how have we done as Red Hat so far from a company perspective. And give you a quick snapshot. We have, in the meantime, we are in over 200 countries. We are present in Europe, like in 14 countries officially, pretty much doing business in every European country. We have 3,700 people worldwide. We are already close to 1,000 people in Europe. I started 8 years ago. We have been 100 people in Europe. Now we are 1,000 in Europe, so it's quite a development. Market share on the Linux side, you see many different numbers, as low as 65%, as high as 85%. So I picked something in the middle, which is 75% in the enterprise Linux market, and so on. But the most important number on this slide here is the 7, because we got rated in the last 7 years 5 times #1 and 2 times #2 software company providing value to the enterprise. That's always a study which is done by CIO Insight magazine on a worldwide basis. And the reason we are getting rated 7 times in a row this high is actually the basis is our business model, because it is a true value-based business model. And believe me, 7 times in a row, you don't get lucky 7 times in a row. We don't have the money to pay 7 times in a row to study, to be ranked #1. There is something which we're doing right. And this doing right is based in the business model itself, because it forces us to add value and provide value to the end customer. So let me switch now to the third one, the third element which should help closing this gap between resources and demand. It's actually everything around cloud. Cloud is the big buzzword going now on, but there is a lot of reality already around cloud. Always depends on who you ask, you get a different definition of cloud, but you can also say cloud is is the way towards utility computing. In a few years, it's like when you need energy, you just plug, whatever you plug in, you use the power out of the plug, and then you get a bill, and you don't worry what's happening in the background. To a certain extent, that's where cloud, will do the same or should do the same with IT resources.